income and wealth disparities remain a global and local concern. According to the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report of 2017, the growing increase in income and wealth distribution is a trend most likely to determine global developments over the next decade. Furthermore, a report released by Oxfam on the 22nd of January this year states that 82% of the wealth generated in 2017 went to the richest 1% of the global population, while the 3.7 billion people who make up the poorest half of the world population saw no increase in their wealth. Namibia is no exception to income disparities and inequalities. In fact, according to the World Bank, in terms of the Gini coefficient, Namibia is unfortunately one of the countries with the highest levels of income disparities in the world. Yes, since 1990, we have made good progress in reducing poverty, with the overall poverty rate declining from 70% in 1993-94 to 18% in 2015-2016. However, the fall in income disparities, as measured by the Gini coefficient, has only seen a marginal decline from 0.70 to 0.58 during the same period. This amply demonstrates that while poverty and income disparities are interrelated, the two should not be conflated. With poverty on the decline, the argument is advanced that there is no need to proceed with reforms aimed at addressing underlying structural inequality. This argument is faulty. A World Bank report on the distributional impact of fiscal policy in Namibia, released in 2017, argues correctly that the main reasons for the decline in poverty and the minimal decline in income disparity may be attributed to the government interventions, such as our relatively progressive tax policy and a system of comprehensive social safety nets. In terms of the progressiveness of our tax system, the World Bank report states that the top 10% income earners accounts for 70% of tax collection. The Namibia Statistics Agency reinforces the earlier point I made in its 2009-2010 report on income and expenditure. It highlights that about 16% of the population directly and indirectly benefited from social grants back then. Don't forget an elemental fact. These grants are directly funded by the state from the national budget. In the current financial year, that is 2017-2018, an amount of 6.7 billion Namibian dollars was allocated for the administration of various social safety nets. We are proud that we are able to cater for most of our vulnerable citizens through social grants. But we cannot build a prosperous nation around that motto. We have to address the underlying structural impediments which make it difficult, if not impossible, for many Namibians to effectively participate in the economy and engage in wealth-creating opportunities. Income inequality is aggravated by our unique political history, including the burning land question. It is an unfortunate reality and daily experience. Black Namibians continue to bear the biggest brand of this dark period of our history. It is why we will intensify corrective interventions during the remaining period of the Harambee Prosperity Plan. Later this year, we will convene the second land conference. The conference will aim to deal with inefficiencies and challenges around land redistribution, restitution, and tenure. I shall not dwell on that now here today. The NEEEF consultations and the implementation of the strategy constitute a necessary intervention in dealing with structural inequality, of which income disparities and lack of participation of the black majority remain a glaring legacy of our past. We will not allow the status quo to continue. The final leg of the consultation is now before us. It is disturbing to note that there are some who have cast aspersions on the new equitable economic framework, even before consultations were concluded. First, they insinuate that NEEEF targets a particular segment of our population. Second, they argue that NEEEF will affect our economic competitiveness. Third, they allege that government does not take the land issue and concomitant income inequality seriously. I was recently asked what government has been doing about the land question. I found the question odd, as it suggested that government had done nothing to address the land question and the issue of income inequality. Our response to those that try to discredit government interventions at every opportunity is, what are you or what are your solutions? What are your solutions? Sadly, very often, the reply is deafening silence. I'm glad to note that some have made use of the consultative sessions to provide inputs on how to address this difficult issue. In addressing the issue of income inequality, we are not starting on a blank page. We can draw from the comparative experiences of Singapore, Malaysia, closer home, South Africa. Even as we draw from their experiences, we will do it the Namibian way, context-specific and in a sustainable manner where all feel included. We have allowed ample time for consultations on NEEEF. This workshop demonstrates the difficult road we have traveled. There are two key aspects here. From their experiences, we will do it in a Namibian way, context-specific, as I said, and sustainable manner. First, we need to get feedback on the outcome of the nation stakeholder consultations on the new Equitable Economic Empowerment Framework. New, we may consider that there are proposals, Equitable Economic Empowerment Framework and the draft bill. This will involve a brief analysis of the difficulties that stakeholders had with regard to the interpretation or the logic of certain empowerment provisions in the framework and the bill. Second, we shall use this opportunity to provide feedback to the technical team on key policy and legal issues which may need to be revisited, revised, replaced, or even jettisoned. This includes feedback surrounding 4 problematic questions. 1, definitional issues, such as previously disadvantaged persons and private enterprises. Previously disadvantaged people. You don't know them? We have to revisit that. Previously disadvantaged persons and then private enterprises. You don't know those things? 2, whether all aspects of NEEEF should be mandatory. Some argue the ownership and management representation pillars should be voluntary. Let us debate this matter. My view is that the entire framework should be mandatory, given the past failed experience of voluntary transformation. 3, the role of sectoral chapters, and we must be flexible in our approach here. And 4, monitoring and funding mechanisms. The framework makes provision for a monitoring mechanism while it is absent from the bill. I support a proposal that a monitoring mechanism should be included in the bill. On funding mechanism, we must be flexible and hold hands. Government cannot carry the sole burden on financing empowerment. It must be collective responsibility, including government, development finance institutions such as the DBB, Agribank, the GIBF, private sector financial institutions, and participating enterprises. Our debate should be guided by the principle of accelerated broad-based economic empowerment. Broad-based economic empowerment should include impoverished communities and workers in envisaged empowerment schemes. We should also focus on the plight of farm workers, domestic workers, and all disenfranchised Namibians when we discuss empowerment. Provision of decent housing through housing schemes and savings towards retirement through the introduction of pension schemes will also go a long way in the empowerment of our people and creation of wealth for citizens to be able to retire in dignity. We are acutely aware of the unintended consequences arising. For example, where only a minority of already empowered, previously disadvantaged persons would benefit from NEEEF provisions, specifically through the ownership pillar. As we discuss the definitional issue of previously disadvantaged persons, we should keep in mind that government has the dual responsibility to take care of the most needy, and it must create an environment where those with ability can prosper. Genuine empowerment should cascade downwards to empower communities and groups rather than individuals. Genuine empowerment should cascade downwards to empower communities and groups rather than individuals. Wealth distribution downwards is more sustainable than wealth distribution upwards. This is the type of model that we would like to promote in Namibia. NEEEF and the attendant bill were drafted in line with the provisions of Article 23, paragraph 2 of the Namibian Constitution. It is similar in intent to the Affirmative Action Act 29 of 1998. I have to remind you that Article 23 authorizes government to enact legislation providing directly or indirectly for the advancement of persons in Namibia who have been excluded from educational opportunities and economic activity by past discriminatory laws or practices. In the same vein, it also calls for the implementation of policies and programs aimed at righting social, economic, educational imbalances in our country. This is further supported by an exemption provided under the Racial Discrimination Prohibition Act 26 of 1991, which permits the preferential treatment of any person pursuant to a policy or program contemplated in Article 23, paragraph 2 of the Namibian Constitution. When you consider those provisions carefully, it is clear that the legal foundations and equity considerations enacting the NEEEF legislation cannot be disputed. Our employment equity provisions have never been legally challenged. I am aware that there are some who have made it clear, or make it their mission, to prove that certain provisions in the NEEEF bill are unconstitutional. Our republic is founded on the rule of law. I must, however, express my disappointment of the way we approach the deep-seated predicament our country is faced with: shocking income and wealth inequalities in the company of Haiti and South Africa. That's where we belong. It is not a sustainable position. We have a history of deep racial divisions. The primary impulse of apartheid was to perpetuate inequalities in virtually all facets of our territory. This includes segregated spatial planning and untold barriers to economic inclusion, disparities in disparities in access to and quality of education and health care, an inhuman practice of separate development, entrenched income and wealth inequalities. They are still evident today. Those are still evident today. We can't say they are over because we got independence in 1990. It's still evident today. If left unattended, high rates of income and wealth inequality would threaten our social cohesion, political inclusion, and peace. If left unattended, high rates of income and wealth inequality would threaten our social cohesion, political inclusion, and peace. It is for this reason that our Constitution made provision for affirmative action to rectify the inherited dilemma of inequality and underdevelopment of the majority. The Namibian government introduced various redistributive laws and policies through a combination of social service provision, social transfers, and taxation. We have implemented a number of empowerment initiatives, including empowerment equity, land resettlement scheme, affirmative action loans for the purchase of land, granting of fish quotas and mineral exploration licenses, creation of community conservancies, provision of social housing, and significant investment in education and training. Comrade Nelson Mandela is right when he says, quote unquote, as long as poverty, injustice, and gross inequality persist in our world, none of us can truly rest. As long as poverty, injustice, and gross inequality persist in our world, none of us can truly rest. We cannot be a peaceful nation when injustice continues to fester like an open wound. It is a matter of common sense. Progress in achieving employment equity in the private sector is slow and does not seem to achieve the desired results. According to the Employment Equity Commission's annual report of 2015 and 16, previously disadvantaged persons occupied a meager 29% of executive directors' positions. Previously disadvantaged men dominate executive director positions who have an overrepresentation of 49%. Yet, this component of our population accounts for less than 10% of total population. Racially disadvantaged men occupy 21% of these positions, and racially disadvantaged women a tiny 8%. Previously advantaged women occupy 9% of these positions. Previously advantaged women, white, occupy 9% of these positions, only 9%, while non-white, non-Namibians, foreigners, occupy 13%. It is against this unpleasant background that the Equitable Economic Empowerment Framework was initiated. Don't we see it? It is against that. Consultations on the framework and the bill were held far and wide. We express our appreciation to those that took time to participate, express their opinions, and make representations. Today, we are gathered here to gain insights from the Prime Minister about the evolution of the National Equitable Empowerment Framework Bill and to consider major concerns expressed by the public. We're going to listen to what they have said and address it. The chairperson of the Law Reform and Development Commission will lead a presentation on that during the course of this workshop. It is expected from us, policymakers and bureaucrats, You are policymakers in front and bureaucrats behind. To seriously consider these public concerns and provide guidance as to how best they can be addressed. We're not trying to hurt anybody. Therefore, consider these things, these public concerns, and provide guidance as to how best they can be addressed. For example, if we deem our requirements to be too ambitious or too onerous, we must propose alternatives. 3 questions could guide the discussions. 1, is the envisaged institutional setup to administer the empowerment drive manageable and sustainable? 2, do we have the financial means to finance economic empowerment transactions? 3, who should be targeted to participate in an empowerment scheme? It is my expectation that we give direction and pointers to problematic questions. We should not stall the momentum, but leave this workshop having shared excellent ideas and provided urgent answers to the critical questions raised. This is the only way to complete the process on this important matter. If so required, further high-level consultations may be undertaken before Cabinet pronounces itself on the way forward for NEEEF. It is my expectation that the bill should be tabled in Parliament during this year. But we want to consult properly. We want to move in the Harambee spirit in the same direction. Those who are trying to refuse, let's convince them. There is no other alternative but to hold hands. But you cannot hold hands when some are left out from sharing in the cake. It's a reality. Furthermore, very soon I will helm a reformed economic advisory council, reformed one, new one, whose membership will be drawn from different industries operating in both global and domestic markets and enterprises, both large and small. It will be a smaller one this time. Director of proceedings, some director of ceremony, sometimes master of ceremony, now director of proceedings. I should emphasize that NEEEF must be seen as an essential policy tool to correct the historical racial gender inequalities in distribution of economic opportunities, access to wealth, income, assets, capital, skills, and employment. I wish to encourage existing businesses not to wait until the bill becomes law, but to be proactive and to start structuring and implementing empowerment transactions with their employees. I commend those who have proactively taken steps to bring on board previously disadvantaged Namibians as shareholders through various employee share schemes. The plight of our youth must be considered seriously. They are faced with the double challenge of income disparities attributable to high levels of unemployment and also the wealth gap. As NEEEF moves into modalities of implementation, adequate attention must be given to formulate responses that will enable our young people to effectively participate in the mainstream of the economy. Let us join hands to elevate this beautiful country to greater heights. It is the only way forward to safeguard social, political, and economic stability. With these words, I urge you all to express your views freely and to give your support to this necessary policy intervention. NEEEF is not about winners and losers. It is a noble win-win policy that will benefit the entire nation. NEEEF has the ability to serve as an anchor and viable tool for enhanced human capital transformation in Namibia through deliberate and consultative intervention by accommodating the majority of the population into the mainstream of our economy. The Nobel laureate in economics, Professor Joseph Stiglitz, is accurate in his framing, quote unquote, growth that is not shared will not be sustainable. Growth that is not shared will not be sustainable. Our intent with NEEEF is therefore not only to realize economic growth, empowerment, and transformation, but to do so in a sustainable, inclusive, and democratic manner. Let us multiply our efforts through greater collaboration and mutual understanding to create an effective and implementable economic empowerment law. May this workshop be a step towards that important goal. The exchange of ideas, experiences, and knowledge is a process that will bring multiple benefits to this multifaceted topic. With this in mind, it gives me great pleasure to officially open this workshop. I wish you fruitful and productive deliberations. I thank you.